In 1851, as America's eyes were fixed on gold and glory, a silent expedition left the eastern ports under government seal. Their mission was not charted on any map, nor spoken of in any official record. They sailed toward the Arctic seas, led by a man whose obsession bordered on madness. Months later, the ship Aurora was gone, swallowed by fog and rumor. What they found in the frozen north was not gold, not land, but something that defied every law of God and reason. Chapter 1. The Letter from Washington. Snow clung to the windows of the Navy Department as Captain Elias Granger stood before the mahogany desk, his gloved hands trembling. The man opposite him, Secretary of the Navy William Preston, didn't look up from the folder in front of him. "You're familiar with the Franklin disaster, Captain?" he asked finally, voice calm yet heavy. "Yes, sir. 2 ships lost in the Arctic. No survivors confirmed. That's what the British claim. But our sources suggest something survived. Something different." Granger frowned. "Different, sir?" Preston slid a sealed envelope across the desk. The wax bore no insignia, only a plain black stamp. "You'll receive your orders at sea. Officially, this voyage doesn't exist. The Aurora will be provisioned and launched from Boston under the pretense of an oceanographic survey. Only your men will know the truth, if they must." Granger hesitated. He had commanded whalers, traders, and explorers across every northern latitude, but this felt wrong. And what truth is that? Preston leaned forward, lowering his voice. In 1847, a coded British transmission was intercepted near Baffin Bay. It mentioned a structure found in the ice. Not a wreck, not a camp. A structure. Granger's heartbeat quickened. "Man-made?" "Unknown," Preston replied. "The Royal Navy attempted to recover it. They never returned." He sat back, eyes hard. "You'll find it, Captain. Bring back whatever records, artifacts, or, God willing, answers you can." Outside, the wind howled through the Washington streets, carrying with it the scent of winter and secrecy. Granger accepted the envelope, saluted, and left. The Aurora set sail 3 weeks later. She was a fine ship, an ice-strengthened bark rigged for endurance, carrying 34 men and provisions for 18 months. The crew believed they were mapping polar currents for trade routes. Only Granger and his first mate, Silas Ward, knew their true destination, the last recorded coordinates of the Franklin expedition, deep in the Arctic Circle. Ward was a wiry, sharp-eyed man who distrusted everyone. "You think this is about gold?" he asked one night as they stood at the rail. Granger shook his head. "No gold here, just ghosts and ice." "Then why the secrecy?" "Because, whatever the British found, someone wants it forgotten." The voyage north was brutal. The Atlantic turned cruel, smashing them with waves taller than the mainmast. Men cursed the cold and whispered of bad omens. On the 22nd day, they passed a drifting berg marked with a shattered British flag, its pole frozen solid into the ice. "Franklin's men?" Ward muttered. "Maybe," Granger said quietly. "Or what's left of them." By February, they reached the mouth of Lancaster Sound. The compass began to spin erratically, needles trembling without reason. One morning, the ship's naturalist, Dr. Hollis, brought Granger a sealed glass jar. Inside was a pale, frost-bitten bird, its wings stiff, its eyes white as marble. Found it lying in the snow, still warm, no tracks around it. Nothing that explains how it got here. Granger said nothing, only told him to record it in the log. One night, under the eerie glow of the northern lights, the lookout cried out, "Light off the starboard bow!" Through his spyglass, Granger saw it, a faint flicker far across the ice. Not fire, not lanterns. It pulsed, rhythmic, cold, like the heartbeat of the world itself. The crew murmured prayers. Ward spat on the deck. "Saints preserve us." Granger gave the order to anchor and lower the longboats at dawn. The next morning the world was silent but for the groan of shifting ice. They trudged for miles until the light returned, shimmering over a ridge of frozen cliffs. Chapter 2. The Ice-Covered Monolith. The men of the Aurora camped on the frozen tundra, the Aurora's green and violet curtains undulating above them like a living, spectral sea. Their breath hung in clouds, the cold biting through even the thickest coats. Granger stood at the edge of the camp, staring at the black stone structure. It rose from the ice like a wall of night itself, flawless and immense, its edges perfectly square, as though carved by some unimaginable precision. "Impossible," murmured Dr. Hollis, kneeling to examine the snow around its base. "There's no tool marks, no evidence of construction, nothing that explains how this could exist." Ward circled it cautiously. "It doesn't belong here. Nothing belongs here." Granger ignored him. He was studying the smooth surface, running gloved fingers along its frozen edges. The stone hummed faintly beneath his touch, a vibration almost imperceptible, like the pulse of the earth itself. It was as though it were alive or waiting. The first days passed slowly. Men sketched and measured, taking careful notes. Granger insisted on strict routines, fearing panic or superstition might spread. At night, the northern lights danced across the sky, reflecting in the polished stone. Shadows shifted unnaturally. Some men swore the wall seemed to change shape, as if inhaling and exhaling like a living creature. On the third morning, a scream cut through the dawn silence. Granger and Ward rushed toward the sound, finding young sailor Thomas Langley staring at a section of ice near the wall. A hole had formed there, perfectly circular, edges black as ink. Inside, the frost glimmered unnaturally, and a faint mist rose from its depths. I saw movement," Langley stammered, trembling. Something crawling." Granger knelt and peered down. Nothing was there, only ice and mist. "You're exhausted," he said. "Get back to the campfire. Warm yourself." But Ward's eyes lingered on the hole. "This isn't natural. The ice is wrong here, warped." Over the next week, their work became almost obsessive. Granger ordered men to clear snow, take measurements, and carve paths around the monolith. They discovered inscriptions at the base, lines of symbols etched deeply into the black stone, faintly luminescent in the pale sun. Hollis recorded sketches, struggling to decipher them. None matched any known alphabet. Some resembled animal forms, others angular patterns that seemed to shift when not looked at directly. One night, Hollis approached Granger quietly. "Captain, I believe it's a record, or a warning." "Warning of what?" He shook his head. "I don't know, but the symbols, they're old, far older than anything recorded in human history, possibly thousands of years, and yet perfectly preserved in ice. They speak of cycles, of a force lying dormant, waiting." Granger's stomach turned cold. He had seen hardship, storms, starvation, and death, but nothing like this.
He wondered if the Franklin expedition had encountered the same, and why they had vanished without a trace. That evening, a strange fog crept across the camp, moving faster than the wind. It carried a faint hum, almost musical, resonating against the ice. The men drew their coats tighter, shivering, though the temperature had not changed. From the fog emerged shadows, not human, yet humanoid in shape, gliding over the ice without leaving footprints. Ward gripped a rifle, hollering for the men to hold their ground. Granger felt a rush of adrenaline and fear he had not known since his youth. "Stand back," he shouted, stepping forward. "Whatever you are, we will not flee." The shapes paused at the edge of the fog, almost observing, almost waiting. Then, as suddenly as they appeared, they vanished into the drifting mist, leaving only a low vibration in the ice and a cold silence that pressed against the ears. The crew gathered around the fire, shaken. Some whispered prayers, others sat in silence, staring into the flames, as if it might explain what they had seen. Granger could not sleep that night. He remained by the wall, tracing the alien symbols by lantern light. He began to suspect the truth. This was not a place humans were meant to find. The monolith, the fog, the shapes, they were all warnings, tests perhaps, or guardians of something far older than any nation or empire. By the following day, their provisions were running low. Supplies had been rationed carefully, yet the cold had consumed more than expected. Granger held a council. He said, "We continue," his voice firm despite his own growing doubts. "We chart the perimeter, take all observations, and report back to Washington. If what we find is as important as it seems, no one else can discover it without understanding the danger." Hollis leaned in. "And if we cannot understand it?" Granger looked toward the monolith, the wind tearing ice across the ridge. "Then we will return and warn the world before it claims us too." That night, the aurora burned brighter than ever. Shadows moved across the ice, elongating and twisting. Granger remained by the wall, resolute. He could not yet imagine what awaited them, or the choices he would be forced to make in the cold, silent, frozen wilderness. Something had been sleeping for centuries in that ice, and now it had noticed them. Chapter 3: The Frozen Passage. The dawn arrived with a hollow quiet, the kind that presses against the mind. The northern lights had faded, leaving only an endless sky streaked with pale blue and silver. Granger ordered the men to prepare the sledges, knowing they could not remain idle. Supplies were low, and the Aurora could only stay anchored for so long before shifting ice might crush her hull. They were explorers, but now the ice felt like a trap. Ward was the first to voice the fear that had been growing in all of them. "Captain, we should retreat. Whatever is here, it's not meant to be disturbed." Granger shook his head. "We came to chart, to observe. Retreating now would render all we've done meaningless. We've seen the wall, the shapes, we've touched the stone. There is no turning back." The sledges carried their instruments, chronometers, sextants, sketches of the monolith, and Hollis's jars containing strange, frost-bitten specimens. The men trudged across the ice, their boots cracking and crunching against the frozen landscape. The wind scoured their faces, leaving frost in their hair and beards. By mid-afternoon, they reached a narrow channel of jagged ice, leading into what Granger would later describe as a corridor, a frozen passage stretching for miles. The walls of ice on either side shimmered with an unnatural luster, reflecting the men's lanterns like mirrors. It was as though they had entered a cathedral sculpted from frost. "Looks endless," murmured Langley, shivering despite his thick coat. "It leads somewhere," Granger replied, "and I intend to find out where." As they advanced, the temperature seemed to drop further. Instruments began malfunctioning. Compasses spun in erratic circles. Sextants gave impossible readings. Hollis muttered that the air itself seemed to bend, affecting both light and sound. The men whispered, their voices echoing strangely. Hours passed. The corridor twisted unexpectedly, sometimes narrowing to just enough room for the sledges. Occasionally they passed ice formations that seemed deliberate, geometric, unlike anything found in nature. Hollis stopped to examine one, a perfectly cubic block suspended in the ice. Inside it was a fossil, a creature neither bird nor mammal, frozen mid-motion, its features distorted and alien. What is this?" he whispered. Granger did not answer. He had seen too many impossible things in the frozen north to deny the truth creeping up on him. Something in the ice was conscious, ancient, and aware of their intrusion. That night, the aurora blazed across the sky like liquid fire, illuminating the structure in a spectral glow. For the first time, Granger felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air. The ice itself seemed to shiver, and from the black form, faint streaks of light pulsed rhythmically, like signals, like a message waiting to be read by those who dared approach. Hollis whispered, "It's communicating." "Or warning," spat Ward. Granger studied the structure, aware that their expedition was no longer just a journey of discovery. It had become a trial, a confrontation with a force beyond comprehension. And in the still Arctic night, he realized whatever lay ahead could change not only their lives, but the understanding of the world itself. The men did not sleep that night. Shadows moved along the ice, unbound by natural law. The black structure hummed, sending vibrations that shook the frozen ground. Granger kept watch, knowing that at any moment the expedition might pass the threshold from discovery into the unimaginable. And somewhere, far beyond the horizon, the ice was waiting. Chapter 4. Echoes in the Ice. The morning light was weak, filtered through a thick veil of mist that hung stubbornly over the frozen basin. The men of the Aurora huddled near the edge of the black structure, their breaths rising like smoke in the frigid air. Granger inspected the alien inscriptions etched along the stone surface, each symbol glowing faintly as if responding to their presence. He traced the lines with gloved fingers, sensing an intelligence in the carvings, an awareness that watched their every move. "Captain," Ward said, his voice tight, "I think we've gone too far. The ice, it's alive here. It moves subtly. Do you feel it?" Granger nodded, reluctantly agreeing. For days he had tried to suppress the rising fear, focusing instead on documentation and measurement. But now, standing at the threshold of the structure, he could feel subtle vibrations beneath his boots. The ice was not inert. It was as though the frozen world itself were conscious, observing, calculating. Hollis knelt before one of the glowing symbols, sketching furiously. "These markings," he whispered, "they're like a map, a record of events but not of human origin. It is as if an entire civilization, older than any we know, is encoded in this ice." Ward swore under his breath. "Civilization? Captain, this isn't right. Nothing like this should exist here. The Arctic has claimed men for centuries, Yet somehow, they made this? Granger's gaze swept across the vast ice basin. The black structure loomed, angular and intimidating, the sun glinting off icy spires surrounding it. At its base, small fissures glimmered with an inner light, pulsing faintly, almost as if drawing life from the air itself. The men began exploring cautiously, moving along a path partially cleared by shifting ice and snow. Every step they took seemed to amplify a low, vibrating hum from the structure, resonating in their bones. Hollis paused, touching one of the fissures. The moment his skin met the ice, his eyes widened and he recoiled. It knows we're here," he stammered. Granger studied him closely. "No, Hollis, we know it's here. That's different, but it may be testing us or warning us." As they advanced, a strange flickering light appeared inside a narrow crevice leading into the black mass. Hollis insisted on investigating. "There may be chambers inside, records, artifacts, or even survivors," he said, eyes alight with scholarly obsession. Ward, visibly shaken, drew his rifle. "Or traps," he muttered. "We go in, and we may never return." The decision was made. Granger ordered 3 men to remain outside, while he, Ward, and Hollis entered the narrow crevice. The passage was tight, forcing them to move single file. Ice pressed against their shoulders, and the humming vibration grew stronger with every step. Inside, the corridor expanded into a vast chamber. The walls glowed faintly, etched with more symbols that seemed to shift subtly when viewed from different angles. At the center of the chamber was a frozen pool, black as obsidian, perfectly smooth and eerily reflective. Hollis approached, mesmerized, studying the surface. This is a record of events, moments preserved, as if time itself has been trapped here. Look, the patterns, the figures, they move when you watch them. Granger bent closer. The images were not just frozen, they appeared alive, moments from an unimaginable past. Ships moved silently across icy waters. Figures in strange attire walked among them, performing tasks they could not comprehend. The walls themselves seemed to pulse in rhythm with the pool, a silent heartbeat echoing through the chamber. Ward, unnerved, lowered his rifle. "This isn't human. None of this could be human. Look at them, the shapes, the architecture. It's like another world." Hollis traced a line of symbols leading from the pool toward a narrow stairway carved deep into the ice. "There's more," he said, eyes wide with awe and fear. "Whatever this is, it continues downward, layers upon layers, a record of centuries, perhaps millennia." Granger's jaw tightened. "We proceed carefully. Every step we take must be documented. If this is a civilization older than ours, or a knowledge we cannot comprehend, it must not be disturbed carelessly." As they descended, the chamber's temperature dropped, and the vibrations grew stronger. Strong shadows flickered along the walls, sometimes darting just out of sight, always disappearing when looked at directly. Hollis whispered, almost to himself, "It's observing, waiting to see what we do next." Suddenly, a low roar echoed from deep within the ice. The floor trembled slightly, and small fissures appeared in the walls of the stairway. The men froze. The sound was not just mechanical, it was alive, resonating with intelligence. Granger gripped Ward's shoulder. "Stay close. Whatever this is, it can hear and respond. Keep your wits about you." The 3 men pressed onward, deeper into the frozen labyrinth. Each step they took them further from the known world and closer to something ancient and terrible, something that had been undisturbed for thousands of years. The ice seemed to hum louder, vibrating through their bones, as though the entire structure were awakening to their intrusion. Outside, The wind howled across the basin, carrying a faint, almost musical vibration. The crew left outside huddled together, unaware of the magnitude of what awaited their captain, their first mate, and the naturalist below. The expedition had left the world behind, and in the frozen passage, something older than memory waited.
Chapter 5. The Heart of the Ice. The stairway ended in a cavern so vast it seemed endless, its ceiling lost in shadows. The walls glimmered faintly with frost that resembled liquid silver, and the air was thick with a vibration that resonated through every bone. The black obsidian pool from above reappeared here, expanded into a frozen lake, reflecting shapes that defied understanding. Granger took a deep breath, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with temperature, a sense of being watched, of being measured. Hollis stepped forward, sketchbook trembling in his hands. "Captain, these figures, look, they're moving. Not alive, but animated somehow. They're performing tasks, communicating with one another. It's like a preserved moment of history, but far older than anything human." Ward kept his rifle raised, eyes scanning the shadows. "History? These things, they look wrong. The shapes, the forms, not human, not any animal I've seen. Captain, we shouldn't be here." Granger said nothing, focusing instead on the intricate patterns etched along the ice. Symbols ran in bands across the walls, converging on the frozen lake, as if drawing attention to something at its center. The hum beneath their feet had grown louder, almost a pulse, syncing with an instinctive rhythm in Granger's chest. "See this?" Hollis pointed at a cluster of symbols. "They're aligned with the figures in the pool. It's as if the symbols are directing the scene, or recording it. But it's not chronological. It's layered, simultaneous, like a memory from a different reality. Or a warning. Captain, these markings, the shapes outside, the wall, the stairway, it's all a trap, a test. Whoever built this, or whatever built this, didn't want humans to meddle." Granger ignored the fear gnawing at him. They had traveled thousands of miles, faced storms and shifting ice, and he would not turn back now. He approached the center of the lake cautiously. The ice underfoot was perfectly smooth, reflecting their figures like glass. When he knelt to touch it, the vibration beneath his palms intensified, sending a shiver through his arms. From the center of the lake, a structure emerged, or perhaps revealed itself. A spire, dark as night, grew upward, translucent yet solid, and the hum coalesced into a low, resonant tone. Light patterns radiated from the spire, illuminating forms within the ice, humanoid figures frozen mid-motion, yet distinct, as if aware of being observed. Hollis whispered, "This is a record of civilization. Not human, but intelligent, advanced. They were documenting themselves, preserving everything in ice. And now, we've awakened it." Ward stepped back, fear overtaking reason. "We shouldn't touch anything. We should leave now, before it notices us too closely." Granger's eyes narrowed. "Leave? We cannot leave. We must understand. If this is what I think it is, a civilization older than recorded history, preserved perfectly, we are the first to witness it in thousands of years." He extended his hand toward the spire. The vibration grew into a pulse, echoing through the chamber, through the ice, through the men themselves. The shadows flickered violently along the walls, coalescing into humanoid figures that were neither solid nor completely immaterial. Their movements were smooth, fluid, impossible, yet undeniably deliberate. Hollis stepped closer, entranced. "They're watching us, or communicating. I think the symbols are a language, a medium to convey thought.
Perhaps it's possible to understand it if we listen. Ward barked a warning, but Granger silenced him with a look. The men's breaths formed clouds in the cold air, trembling as the pulsing light from the spire intensified. Shapes within the ice shifted, mimicking gestures, almost like a conversation, but they spoke in a rhythm, not sound. Suddenly, a surge of energy pulsed from the spire, traveling along the ice like veins of lightning. The men were thrown back, hitting the wall with a hollow crash. Hollis groaned, rubbing his temples, his eyes wide with wonder and terror. It's alive! It's alive! Granger forced himself to his feet. His gloved hands gripped the edge of the pool. Alive or not, we are the first humans to encounter it. We must document, survive, and report. But Ward, stay vigilant. We cannot allow curiosity to endanger us. The chamber fell silent again, except for the faint pulse, now slower, almost contemplative. The ice forms shimmered, receding slightly, allowing the men a tentative view of the spire's peak. Granger knew they had only scratched the surface. The structure was larger than they could comprehend, extending far beyond the chamber, its true scale hidden in layers of ice and shadow. Hollis stepped back, voice trembling. "Captain, this could rewrite everything we know. If we survive, and if the world ever learns what we found." Granger nodded grimly. "We will survive. But first, we must understand. The expedition is no longer merely discovery. It is a confrontation with something older than time, preserved perfectly, waiting for us to arrive." Ward muttered under his breath, gripping his rifle tightly. "And if it decides, we're not welcome." Granger stared into the pulsing light, knowing the answer was coming. The ice was no longer just a frozen barrier. It was alive, intelligent, and it had been patient for centuries. Now it was awake and watching them. The expedition had crossed the threshold. There was no return.